Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of 10-Ton Hammer Talks. Today, obviously, episode 6, we have titled Opening the Gates. This week we've got kind of an interesting show. I don't know if you guys have been following the content this week. I haven't got that much out, and there's a little bit of a reason for it. It kind of plays into some of what is titled today and some of our topic on development and game launches, transparency, all kinds of stuff like that. So I am going to go ahead and pass over to Jeremy while we get things set up here. Oh, and I almost forgot, we have a special guest here today with us. You guys might recognize him from a little show called Theory Forge that we do together, and also too, if you watch Twitch at all, and you might be familiar with Who's Gaming Now, and he's also a developer or a game designer working on My Dream. So Neurotoxin is with us, and you guys can see him. And Jeremy, go ahead and take it away.
Alright, so we got started today. Apparently there's some background noise. I'm not hearing it. We're getting from the chat there might be some background noise. So yeah, check into that. Make sure we're good there. But yeah, other than that, our obligatory obviously we are here for 10-Ton Hammer. We can't be here without them. So, whenever you guys get a chance, please, check out 10tonhammer.com. We do a bunch of, guides, news, features, etc. A lot of good stuff, and a lot of people who really care about gaming. And again, without 10-Ton Hammer, we wouldn't be here for your entertainment. So, please check them out. Other than that, we're pretty excited to have Neuro here today. So just for those who aren't familiar, Alex gave you kind of a little intro, Neuro, but why don't you, go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Oh, for sure. So, I've been gaming for pretty much my entire life. I think my earliest memory was playing Empire Strikes Back on Atari at 2 years old. So, if you were born in 1986 or later, I've been playing video games for longer than you've been alive. So, with all of that experience, literally a lifetime of playing games, I definitely have gotten into all sorts of different games, gotten into development, working on different sorts of projects, indie stuff, a little itty-bitty little bit of AAA at the start, back when THQ was still around. And I've really just, had a lot of experience seeing the transition and actually campaigning for the transition from subscription-based games to free-to-play games. It's something that I've seen over a while. I've been really happy about it, and it's something that really kind of comes with the change of the times. Like the idea that people have $15 a month that they can throw towards games just casually, isn't what it used to be. So. Other than that, yeah, I work on My Dream. I am the community manager, game designer, and a few other roles over there. So you'll see me on a lot of the broadcasts. I actually do the My Dream show on Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific, the My Dream community show. That same time, Tuesday and Wednesday, we also have a couple other shows that we do, our Art Corner and our Coding Corner shows, which are also pretty awesome. And that's actually been one of the things that I've been pushing for with our open development, is getting a little bit public with everything. So we'll get into that a little bit more when we get into the main content of it. One of the other things I should say is I really am a multi-genre gamer. Maybe not as much in the sim games, RTS games, and racing games, but except for like Mario Kart and that sort of stuff. But otherwise, I'm pretty much into everything. Puzzle games, platformers, first-person shooters, story-based games, isometric, ARPG, really the entire length and breadth of what's available out there for games. I play a lot of, and I particularly enjoy a lot of procedural content and a lot of open world stuff with exploration and options for creativity. So something like Terraria, when that came out, I was super happy with it. So that's... I could keep on going on about me, but let's kind of get into the meat of the show here, I think.
Yeah. So, like Neuro, I'm also really a fan of all different types of games. I'm not tied to any particular genre, although I do favor the MMOs a lot just because of my role-playing background, but also tabletop gaming I love, which you guys know. But anyways, kind of the topic we're talking about here is really general to all gaming. And I guess it would specifically be tied towards online games mostly, but it could apply to any type of game. But before we really kind of get into some of the deeper meat of today's topic, I kind of wanted to open up with sort of an introductory bit of, kind of passing it around to everybody and asking, when you look at, when you see a game announced or debuted or saying, hey, we're working on this game, something like that, what are your initial thoughts? Like when you see somebody's announcement, what do you think is important that announcement should have, or what should developers be communicating about a new project they're going to be working on, or launching sometime soon?
I'll let our guest take the first crack at that one.
Oh man, that's such a difficult question to answer because it really depends on the pacing and timing of things, how long they're expecting to be working on, how far along it already is, if they are planning to do more of an open development, or if it's going to be closed development and they're just going to be sending teaser trailers at us, and maybe having somebody do an interview that's got a set of questions that they've already approved to make sure they don't have to go and accidentally reveal anything, and really just keeping things behind closed doors. So that's one of the first things is really knowing where you're at with things, knowing how far along, how much detail you can actually provide relative to the way that you're presenting the game, and then based on that, I'll actually have a good idea of how closely I should follow the game. Open development, definitely a lot more room for me to keep checking in here and there and seeing what's going on. Closed development, basically it's like, okay, this game's going to be totally awesome. I'll check back on this at E3 next year, or the next show that I'll see them at. Because that's the other thing for me is I go to all the expos, or at least a lot of them, PAX and South by Southwest and E3 and SIGGRAPH I was just at last week. So a lot of times I'll be talking with the developers at the place where they're announcing the game, so I can also kind of temper my expectations based on the conversations I have with them.
So I'll say for me, because I'll build off your point, because obviously whether it's open or closed development makes a huge difference, in exactly what to expect. I will say that given that I feel that closed is probably still more common, at least from the things that I've seen, what I don't want is to hear about like a game like 3 years before it's going to launch, hey, we're probably working on this thing that might come out eventually. You should be excited about it, because by the time anything's actually happened, I've already forgotten about that game like a year ago. And I feel like that happens sometimes, and that always bothers me, because when I get excited, and maybe this is just me, I don't know what different people feel, but when I'm excited about something, I'm like, wow, that sounds awesome. I want it now. And I don't want to hear that it's, 3 years from now, it's, probably going to be coming out. If everything's on schedule, it probably won't be. Like I think one of the most, famous examples is if you look even at, some of the biggest ones, look at Final Fantasy. The next Final Fantasy game that's going to be coming out was originally going to be coming out, years past? As a different, Final Fantasy 13, and, eventually, it's going to become, 15 or whatever they're up to now. That game looks really cool, right? And you see all these trailers, and you see, and I understand, a year or so, and the next year you see another trailer, and it's like, wow, this is going to be great. When's it coming out? Oh, never? Cool. So that I think is one of my biggest pet peeves with the way that development goes, and that's why open development is cool, because you can get some insight into where things are going. But even closed development, I understand the thought process behind it. I think sometimes developers just get too antsy and they jump the gun and start talking about things that they probably should have kept under wraps for a little bit longer, because they really weren't ready to talk about it yet.
I actually want to give one counter to that, and this is a very niche example, and I don't know if there's any way to duplicate it. Final Fantasy VI came out. Game was amazing. Chrono Trigger, Secret of Evermore, and then Square Enix it wasn't even Square Enix at the time, they just kind of stopped making stuff. It's like, well, what about Final Fantasy VII? Where's Final Fantasy VII? We heard about this awesome game. And then all of a sudden we hear about this insane deal that Square is going to make the next 20 games on the PlayStation, one of which being Final Fantasy VII. And then, holy crap, they're making it, fully 3D, and using the same quality of storytelling and game mechanics that they've always had. Well, that created just a giant hype train that actually led to it being their most successful game in the franchise for the longest time. They actually claimed they refused to remake it until they made a more successful Final Fantasy. But apparently, whether or not that's true, they're actually remaking it now to make it all like realistic and gritty. I'm so excited for that. But that's one very rare example, that starting the hype train like way before it's ready somehow ended up snowballing into a just the right thing at the right time and being just absolutely successful. I've seen a lot of games that tried to do that and failed. Duke Nukem, that game was in development for like a decade, and it turned out just this horrible piece of crap. So
Yeah.
but that's also, I should really diverge from this topic because that's more talking about closed development. Open development is a different story. You hear about a game 3 years before it comes out, and you see the open development in process. Well, some of these games like Korea, that game looked ugly at the very start. It was blocky and chunky and weird, but over time, as he kept on working on it and kept on building the game up and doing live streams and stuff, now it's a beautiful game. Of course, his wife is like a character children's illustrator sort of thing, like a book artist or whatever. So she lended her art style to the game. The game is now beautiful. It runs smooth. Multiplayer is fun. There's a lot of awesome content to it. And you can see the entire progress of that from the very roots to where we're at now. And for that, yes, he said, I'm going to make this game. But he never backed off and he never stopped being public about it. So the game that he's getting ready to release is something that, while it might have been a few years in the works, is, there has been no break in the action. And that's one of the big problems with a lot of games, closed and open, is they'll make an announcement and then you don't hear from them for a while.
Yeah, it's always been intriguing to me how, as we've kind of progressed forward with, better internet, more accessibility to information, more kind of instantaneous, the ability to instantly get, what you want, and yet you see developers moving to this position of they're actually announcing things way before and actually making, I'd say, a less patient audience have to wait longer than they used to for games, just because the information's out there, people know that it exists, that it's being worked on, and it's kind of counterintuitive to the whole thing. But with the way the internet is, I don't think anything can truly be done in secret these days. I think probably even some of the best studios out there at keeping tight lids on things, it's impossible to not let the hype be what the hype is, which probably ties into why developing studios are moving towards early access and allowing people to get their hands on the product being tested early, which, as much as I hate this thing, or I at least hate the way it's used by a lot of developers that aren't kind of taking it and using it for what it should best be used for, but the real point of the issue is, it comes with a lot of pros, but it also comes with a lot of cons, and I don't think a lot of developers are spending the time to really hash out these things with their teams and kind of address these issues before they become issues. But either way, I think that early access can be a very good thing. I think that we've seen a lot of games out there that have done it really well, seen games that have not done it so well. I've used the example of Windward in the past as a game that was an early access game that felt extremely polished, and even though the game content wasn't even fully there, the whole game felt and moved pretty well. So just playing it, you got the idea, hey, this is a game that I want to hang around for. Whereas some other early access games come out and they're just very weak, maybe they have just as much content or just as little content as Windward did, but they're not polished, and you just don't have any standards to go by in the early access realm. So players just, they get negative opinions, and there's burnout, and there's, all those other negatives that I've written about before. So
Well, there's also one other factor to that is a lot of these games rely on having a lot of players to be fun. Like Two Worlds 2, I've logged onto that a few times, and there's like a couple high levels hanging out in town, and then your buddy who that you got the game to play along with or whatever, and that's it. And there's not really that many people, or especially new esports type games like Arena Cyber Revolution. It's a fun game. It's a 3v3 hockey sort of game. And that one's been fairly open with the development process. A bunch of Ubisoft veterans there actually, so some of the ones that make really solid stuff, not the ones that make the bug-tastic adventures. But that game, they've been having. I don't know if it's an issue now, but earlier on, it was a hard time getting enough people in to be able to play against not bots for every match. And I guess one of the other things with that is when you're relying on other players, you're also relying on the servers being solid, which means if latency is an issue, the fun factor can definitely go down really quickly. Especially it's like, oh man, I tried to heal him, but he was already dead before latency caught up. That's no fun. So that's one sort of aspect to it is for something that relies on having a community. Not having a community really hurts. And not having, obviously, a AAA marketing budget or really being able to get the name, get the word out there, it really it becomes like a negative spiral at that point because you're not going to get the funds to make more stuff or do more marketing, and the project will sometimes just kind of fizzle or fade away at that point.
yeah, it seems like for most early access games and programs that are developed, it's a lose-lose, in the majority of cases, and a win-win in the cases that work out, It's just this big polarizing extreme of if it works well for a game and not. You don't see too many games where it's like, the early access was okay, I didn't mind, it worked out all right. It's either terrible for that game or, amazing for a game. So, but, just all, side conjecture aside and throwing stuff out there, I wanted to ask both you guys, and you can kind of chime in with whatever you've experienced, but can you talk about an early access experience for you, maybe your worst experience and your best experience, or one or the other, and just kind of give examples maybe of things that you've seen that are real examples that you can share with the audience.
Oh, Starforge is a sad, sad story. That game looks so awesome. My brother and I both bought the $50 package on a Steam sale or whatever, and we were just so amped about that game, and it just never came to fruition. It turns out that the voxel engine was actually using a product that later stopped being available on the market, which is actually the voxel engine that My Dream is using, that our CTO developed. So it unfortunately, them and anybody else that was using voxel form back in I think 2012 kind of got screwed on that. So Starforge would have been an amazing game if they didn't have to try to work around the tech limitation of having to kind of work on something that wasn't really supported anymore, and not having to deal with that would have given them a lot more time to work on the actual controls and UI and in-game tutorials and stuff to make the game a lot more playable, because that was ultimately the problem. It has all these features, but you can't really find them, and it's not really very well explained. So that one, I would say that one was probably one of the worst ones that I spent money on. And I'm not going to say it was bad. I enjoyed the experience with it, but expectations definitely haven't been met for the $100 Trailblazer pack that I bought for Landmark. That one, I expected so much, and it looked so good at the start. Jeremy, how about you?
So I haven't done a whole lot of early access, mainly because I've been wary of it, I think I'm going to say. The only one that really stands out to me, and I say stand out, I'm going to follow that by I don't remember the name of the game, but it was a few years back, and a friend of mine got me into like this MMO that was early access, and like it looked good, but it had some of the issues, like the kind of things you're talking about. Some areas were well populated, and the others, you couldn't find a soul. You know, it's just completely NPCs. You know, there was no one anywhere, and latency was 100% an issue, which you wouldn't even think. But he, you know, there'd be like, you know, this instance over here of, you know, enemies that we're not ready for, right? So like we try to, you know, walk around them, and suddenly my character's like walking right towards them, and he's like, well, why did you go over there? I'm like, I don't know. I didn't mean to. I didn't think I did. You know, but for some reason, the game decided that's where I wanted to go. So like that was interesting because it had some features that were cool, and you know, some things that looked good, and the visuals were actually pretty decent. You know, but then as I said, you have your problems with population, you have your problems, you know, with the servers. Are they actually able to, you know, handle the areas that are populated? Because that's where we started running into issues. Where there was no one around, the game ran pretty well. When you started, you know, getting to the areas, you know, where there were people around, you know, suddenly, you know, things were jumping around, things weren't going where they're supposed to, etc. So that was kind of a turn off. Now for me, like, I kind of like MMOs, but I've never really been a big MMO player. I've, you know, usually gravitated towards other genres. So like this was kind of, you know, one of those times where I'm like, all right, you know, my friend's really trying to get me into it. I'll give it a shot. And so, you know, I go for it, then I get that. And I'm like, you know what? I don't think so. So, you know, that it did not give a fantastic first impression because they worked on the visuals, but I think maybe, you know, lacked in a few other areas.
Gotcha.
What about your best, Nero? What would you say was some of your best early access or early game launch experience?
Still ongoing, actually. A game that I've been continuing to go back to. It's called 20XX. It's basically procedural Mega Man X roguelike. 8 bosses. Their levels are randomized. They get a little bit harder as the game goes on. There's going to be like a 9th level and potentially extra, like, you know, Wily Stage style content. But that game I've just been continuing to go back to. I first did a demo of it after South by Southwest. I met one of the folks from Firehose Games, and they gave me that and Cat Lateral Damage, which is also a really, really fun game. Basically just continuing to continuing to play it as every update comes through, give them feedback on it, and they'll listen to the feedback, they'll make suggestions based on it, they'll balance the content that is really too difficult. There was this jump that I had that was just brutal. I brought it to their attention, and I believe they've adjusted it to not be like something that's a super precise jump. Whoops. Okay, so that's one of the things I've really been enjoying. Just continue to go back as they change more tile sets, as they change out the bosses, boss patterns, completely replaced one of the bosses entirely. The most recent update, they've actually added dialogue with the bosses and more story elements, and they're just continuing to make great progress with that game. It's satisfying to play. That's one of the things they've always had with it, and this is one of the things that is like the most important for doing an early access. Have a vertical slice of completed gameplay. Sure, it wasn't everything in a complete state. They're continuing to change out things, balance things, and everything. But at least they put down enough of all of the basics and all the variations for people to, you know, play the idea of the game and give feedback on it, rather than having, you know, not a vertical slice, but just, you know, a prototype, things that aren't even complete yet, and not really being even able to give critical feedback or really know how much they're actually going to enjoy the finished product. So that's it for me. Jeremy, what's your best?
Well, for me, it's not a paid one, but one of the games that, you know, I've gotten into early that I felt was surprisingly polished was actually Blizzard's Heroes of the Storm, because they opened up access to that game pretty early on. Like they opened up an alpha, you know, they called it, you know, even alpha version, and you know, it wasn't perfect certainly, but there was a lot, you know, there that you could really see, you know, what the game was, you know, what the positive features of it were going to be, and you could already tell, you know, hey, this is, you know, it's going to be something good. You know, obviously, you know, it's Blizzard, you expect, you know, they're not going to put something out there that's, you know, total garbage, but they really did a fantastic job even very early on, and took in, as I say, you know, I think one of the most important things is when you open up a game early is, you know, your feedback from your players, and they did take a lot of that into consideration, you know, for all aspects of the game, you know, whether it be character balance or, you know, map balance, or, you know, is this fun, is that fun, you know, how is this looking, you know, they did several graphical passes on the game as well. So yeah, I mean, it is, a AAA developer, so you kind of expect those things. But even so, they didn't have to do that. How many times do we see the big developers just say, "Listen, you wait. Okay, here's the game. Now you love it because we say so." So I think they did a really good job of opening that one up early and really taking into account feedback and making sure that game was, ready, because it was even in beta for a long time, before it was really opened up. So I think they did a great job, with working on that.
You're muted.
Sorry, everybody. Okay, so just start that over so that the audience can actually hear. But mine are tied together from the same developer, so that's kind of why I waited to go last here. I've talked about Windward, but I'm going to pick a different one. And they're both from Daybreak, and my worst experience kind of is Landmark just because, I mean, it started out great, and then it had such a rapid decline for me. I think that's what led to it feeling like the worst for me. It's also one of the freshest in my memory, so... but the big thing about that is because you get, given this idea of what the game wants to be or is going to be like, and, it changes. And I understand that there's things out of their control, it makes it, maybe they aren't able to do things the same. There's a lot of changeover. So, maybe it's not fair to, say, hey, this is bad because of that, but, the fact is, like, that made the experience, not good. So, and it's something that, it's still a game in progress, so, we'll see if it can turn around. But definitely right now, it's not a good experience, and I think there's a lot of players that have gone into that, and had a mixed bag at best. Maybe a handful of people that have just said, hey, this whole thing has been great for me the whole time. But then the other game from the same developer, which is interesting because, it's the same, company lead, it's the same, marketing position, business position, H1Z1, which is interesting because I played less of it than I played Landmark, but I felt like I enjoyed the experience more, and I wasn't part of that audience that went into that game with the idea that it would be fair or I'd be able to be competitive in it, so the hacking thing wasn't a problem for me, the broken things with airdrops or whatever was not a problem. I felt like that game, even with the little bit you first experienced, you felt immersed in that situation that you're trying to survive, there's zombies and stuff, and it had a lot of work to go, but I felt like it was done well, that initial early access thing. So kind of two polarizing things, and I think it's interesting because they came from the same company, so what did they do differently between the two, what was it? And I think that having the huge announcement, you have all this build up and ramp and hype to the EverQuest Next and Landmark thing, whereas H1Z1 was just kind of like, hey, we just decided to make a game about this, and there wasn't a lot of expectations ahead of time. And I think that probably is the lead issue, I think, and hearing your guys' examples, managing player expectations is probably the biggest challenge for any early access game, because no matter how far you are, no matter how good or what the experience is, you just got to manage and keep players on the same page. So that being said,
I actually wanted to talk about that real quick because there is a striking difference between the two. One is using their own proprietary engine and a different proprietary middleware to develop a brand new game in a genre that is still new and untested and has very, very few examples, if any, versus making a mod of PlanetSide 2 using the zombie survival paradigm that is well established at this point and is actually incredibly familiar to players, where Landmark and Minecraft and that sort of stuff isn't nearly as familiar to the widespread community, I would say, or certainly not something that nearly as many people like play and crack out on. So what you ended up having there with H1Z1 is you were able to essentially make a PlanetSide 2 mod and within like a month just slapdash together the makings of a zombie survival game. And you've already got a vertical slice. You've got AI and NPCs. That's your zombies, your animals, or whatever. I'm sure that one was really easy, at least to make a basic version of it. There's being able to play with other players. That was already there. Health, that was already there. Stamina, that was already there. It wasn't managed the same way. And then the only other systems they added were food, health, and an actual inventory, which previously, was only being applied in Landmark, not in PlanetSide 2. So, like, that's basically three things plus the assets that they needed to add to, three or four things there in order to go from PlanetSide 2 to H1Z1. So the amount of time we were actually waiting on it, the amount of time they actually had to build up the hype train to where we were able to play it was a much shorter turnaround. It was less than a year compared to, SOE Life 2013 getting the grand reveal. And, now we're almost at the end of 2015 and the end is nowhere in sight. So it still doesn't even seem like a vertical slice of complete gameplay in Landmark right now because they don't have the game mastering tools.
That's interesting that you bring, up the additional differences between the two games because, it kind of leads to the question, should a developer be, looking at how much work they have ahead on a certain project, at least estimating to their best value, and kind of judging how they should, build hype based on the work that needs to be done, not necessarily how amazing the end game will eventually be. Because I think that's kind of what we saw out of Daybreak. EverQuest Next and Landmark obviously have way more industry impact in the long run, and so there was a lot of hype for that. Whereas there's still a ton of work to be done for that. And then H1Z1, very short turnaround on a lot of things that they'd already done. So probably could have had a lot more hype because it's a lot closer to completion than a big project like EQN.
Yeah. Well, let me actually give you my experience on my dream up to this point because that might help shed light on a little bit of this, or at least from my perspective on this project. So before I joined the team, we actually had essentially a pre-alpha build that was available. It was labeled as beta. That was not quite accurate. It really was a pre-alpha at that point. And people could just download it straight from the website as we would update. And we were updating like every 2 weeks. People would download the updates. And there was a little community, but it was still so far out from being ready. And performance was so bad that actually making a large media marketing push would have been suicide. You put out the word, everybody downloads the game, tries it out, and immediately writes it off because it's just not ready yet. Because a lot of people still don't know that what an early access game is versus what the finished polished product are two completely separate different things. So they'll try it when it's too early, and that's our one chance. So when we hit Steam Early Access, that was in February, and that's essentially our alpha build. That actually that caused a little bit of a problem for us because once again we hadn't done a lot of marketing, but the push to Steam for Early Access did kind of have making a little bit of extra money and selling some units in mind. So the decision came from on high to put it up there, and we did. But through all the process and finally getting approved for early access and getting it up there, we didn't really have a major marketing push. So instead of getting a bunch of people in when it was too early and still too early, and having them try it out, get burnt out, wonder why they spent that much money, and be angry at us. Instead, we very fortunately, I should say, flew under the radar, and that's helped us out a lot. We've been continuing to be a game that's available on Steam, and the pay to access versus being able to access freely on the website, it has its pluses and its minuses. But most importantly, when we moved to Steam, it also required us to lock down all of our security even further. So in the process, we ended up with a product that has less holes and less things open for people to be able to meddle with our stuff. So we, since going live on Steam for early access, we've been getting a trickle of sales here and there, a little bit of attention. We've gone to some of the conventions, PAX East, South by Southwest. We had a little party at a little after party at E3 that we were at. We were just at SIGGRAPH last week, so we've been getting the word out there. We've been making connections, meeting with the reps from various different companies. I actually met a lot of educators at SIGGRAPH, so starting to get them more involved with the idea of using My Dream as an educational tool. Since Minecraft is being used in a lot of places, and it's but ugly. It's terrible. I wouldn't want to see a project made in Minecraft. So we're hopefully that it's going to be a good alternative that people are going to be able to look to. It's like, well, we could do Minecraft for the curriculum, or we can get My Dream in there and potentially be able to do a lot of different stuff. Of course, Minecraft is more moddable, so that might be why people are doing it. It's just a really easy modding course, but honestly, you can just do that online. That really wouldn't need to be a classroom curriculum. So anyway, so where we're at right now, we're going to be going to beta very soon, and beta is going to include a bunch of new features and the final optimizations of our voxel technology, which is going to bring a ton of performance optimization. It'll finally, at that point, be ready to be the product that we're really ready to show off to people. So when that beta comes around, basically my job is to start the hype train. Don't get too big, not bugging PewDiePie yet, but starting to approach various different gaming communities and start to get them excited about the game. So when it does launch, we actually have a lot more content. That's one of the main things with it. Being a game that's focused on user-generated content, there isn't a lot people can just log in and do solo before they'll kind of get bored or run out of things to do. Unless they just like building content and quests. But part of that is seeing what people have already made, gleaning ideas from that, and making your own stuff out of it. So user content being the main focus, that's why we absolutely have to do a major, marketing push when we get this beta build out. And at that point, we'll essentially be, building towards launch. When we launch, biggest hype media train possible, trying to hit our critical mass of users at that point and see what we can do to retain them. So that's kind of where things have been at with My Dream. And ultimately, I would say we've had most of a vertical slice of gameplay even since I joined the team back in November. But compared to what the full feature set's going to be when we launch, and then looking a year after launch, we've got a long ways to go still in a short time, because we're launching in December.
And just to kind of wrap that up, and something that I've mentioned in the past is I think with the whole early access thing and showing people where you're at, I think one of the biggest things to be concerned with, and it's a very fine line to walk, is it's really just about timing. Because as you said, if you had gotten a big push too early, it could have just killed the game right then and there. And I think that it's difficult sometimes to be able to figure out exactly, when the right time is to, well, we want people to get in so that, there's some interest, but we're not quite ready, to get it, out to as many people as possible because, it might, kill the interest in the game. And I think that's something that some, especially smaller developers, have really struggled with, is deciding exactly when the right time is to really, put the thing out there and, get as many eyes on it as possible. So I think that's, there's no, easy answer to that, but I think that's one of the most important things for them to look at, as far as that goes, because, too early and you kill it, and too late you don't have enough time to, really build it up before the release. So, definitely, can understand, how that can be difficult, but it's really one of the most important things, I think, for them to get down.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was going to say the one other nice thing about staying small and staying under the radar, but doing our very best to engage the community. We only have 5 reviews on Steam, but they're all positive. Even that few a number, 100% is it's nothing to ignore. That's kind of a nice thing. We've got something that's good. We just need the player base to be playing it. But before that, of course, we need it to be something that we want the player base to really sit down and play for a good long time.
Right.
Yeah, I think, kind of the things you guys have talked about, and Jeremy, bringing up the idea that, beyond what we mentioned earlier of just managing player expectations is, paying attention to your timing. There's a lot of variables for developers that are choosing to go early access, especially open development early access, which I think is kind of more of what we've been talking about today. But kind of the last topic that I had here on this subject I wanted to break into is, there's actually another thing that developers can do to kind of help manage all these things and eliminate some of these variables to help their game have a more successful, open development or a more successful early access program. And it's not the only example, but it is one that I know of, and it's one I'd like to bring up so we could discuss it a little bit, and then maybe posit some other ideas or other opinions on what developers could be doing. But anyhow, just to get to the point, for those familiar, we've mentioned it. We had a guest on a couple weeks ago from Revival, Snipe Hunter, and the big thing that sets what they're doing apart from other early access programs that I've seen is, they're paying attention to what genre they are creating a game for. They're looking at the issues that come with, developing a game like this, and they're actually changing the whole way they're building the game to fit that need, to fit the need and to help, help with all these different expectations and the timing. So anyways, just for a quick summary, they are basically making a phased deployment system where, hey, phase 1, we're going to get our client, have housing, players can get in and at least look at our art style, check out a little preview of the game. Phase 2, you're going to get to actually explore some of the world, get to move around, see how see how you're going to fit in the world a little bit, and then phase 3, they actually bring it online and everybody, is there with NPCs, and you're in just this very small part of what's eventually going to be a much bigger world. But anyways, the idea is, start small. If you're doing a large-scale project, which, as an MMORPG, that's what it is. So they're changing the way that the game is being developed in order to, address some of the problems that big games like that have. So anyways, my question to you guys is, what are things that you may like or dislike about, a game like Revival taking this approach, and what are other genres of gaming, or what are other thoughts you guys have on what developers could be doing with their games to kind of ease some of this early access woes?
I think there's actually a lot of merit to that, because as a developer, if you're doing one phase and looking for feedback, it allows you to kind of focus on a few things more rather than, we need everything to be great right away. So I think that can certainly help, and that, especially if you have, smaller teams, working on different aspects of the game, you really can focus harder to make sure that everything's, going well, and you get that feedback at each stage. So I think that can be helpful. I think the more overarching thing there, and one thing that Revival is doing quite well, the main thing is communication with your community, so they know what you're thinking, so they know what to expect. Because if you're telling them, here's what we're focusing on right now, we're aware that, X isn't done yet, but we're working on Y right now, what are your guys' thoughts on that? The communication is what really helps to set the expectations, because if you just put out the early access game and X is almost done, but Y looks, really bad, then, your player base is just going to be like, well, why does this look so bad? When you have that communication, or it's okay, this is what we're working on right now, this is what we really want to show you guys, this is what we really want feedback on, then your player base says, okay, let's take a look at that, and then that's, what they're going to focus on. And it's also just kind of the whole thing about honesty and saying, no, the game isn't done yet, we know that. And like, even when well, early access, of course it's not done yet, a lot of times, and I'm sure we've experienced this, players still look at it as if it was a finished game, even if it's not, and they expect maybe too much, or don't know quite what the point is of what you're trying to get across. So I think it's really just comes down to open and honest communication when you're going to do something like that, especially with the open development. And again, I think the phased deployment has a lot of merit to it, but no matter how you're doing it, if you're not communicating properly with your audience, you're going to run into a lot of problems. Whereas communicating effectively and just being open with them and kind of embracing that community can really actually alleviate a lot of the problems and prevent a lot of misconceptions. So I think that's really probably the most important thing about that.
Absolutely. I mean, communication really is key, and that's actually one of the things that's been helping us out a lot with My Dream is, we don't get a lot of people posting comments and questions, but when they do, we get right on that immediately. If it's a tech problem, we'll, do what we can about it. If it's a question about something, we'll answer it as quickly as we can. So that's usually helped out quite a bit. In fact, when we launched, it was actually $30, and a lot of people really didn't like that we were selling it at the full price and early access when it still had so limited a feature set. So we actually dropped it to $15, and everybody was happy. So yeah, communication is a big deal. That's actually one of the things. There's often really not enough communication when an area or a feature or something isn't complete. Like sometimes it'll just be a simple, box that somebody made in Illustrator in 5 seconds rather than having the full UI, and that's how you're supposed to know that that feature is not complete or available yet. But I feel like putting up a very alpha or very much an obvious like this is still an alpha sign, like putting red tape over it, making it ugly and blaring that no, this isn't finished. This is not, don't represent this as part of complete gameplay. Shred of the Avatar, for example, had these like shimmery curtains in all the places where you couldn't access. And to me, that says I need to unlock something through gameplay to get through there, not this area is not finished yet, don't try to go in there. So sometimes it's better just to be very upfront and say, yeah, this is not ready yet. Maybe give a little explanation or lead a link to a wiki page or something about like, this is what it's going to be or what we think it's going to be when we do put it in. So get hyped about that. But for right now, you're not getting past this certain part, or you're not finishing use of this certain feature for the moment. There's something else that you said there that actually really did resonate, and that's actually the idea of focus testing. Like when you're actually having people play the game, actually doing focus testing. Like this day at this time is when the devs will be on. Everybody come join in, try to break the servers, try to crash the economy, whatever it is. And that can be used for not only getting your own metrics and as well being able to have a great place to generate user feedback and be able to collect it in real time. But it also creates the second sort of interaction that you don't always get to play with the devs. We're not really celebrities, but in the context of the game, we are. We're the people that made the game. We're the people that know the rules. We're the ones who have all the fat loot, as it were. So starting to get to know us now, or in the case of PlanetSide 2, I always enjoyed doing the playtest to see, who from the other factions had to play on VS or had to play on a faction they didn't play on, and getting to, shoot them or like team kill them. It's like, haha, you really represent another faction. That's for, blah, blah, blah. It's just messing with the devs or whatever during the playtest. That was just so much fun. It was just so invaluable. So being able to do that part of the focus testing and focus sort of experiences is really nice. It's a really good way to further engage the community. Now, a couple other things that have been brought up. Pacing content is definitely an important thing. Making sure that you're showing people content at the right time, but at the same time, you have to make sure that the rest of the content that you're not showing them is equally awesome. Otherwise, you run into the situation, I believe it was Age of Conan, that had a beautiful starting area, and then when you got out of that, it was just crap for the rest of it. So, trying to avoid that is definitely a thing. And with the modular development, that can definitely be a thing. If you're not putting as much time and effort and attention into the rest of the world as the stuff you're showing the players, then there's a good chance that when they do have access to the rest of the content, it's not going to be nearly as engaging. I actually think of like Midgar or the Vault in Fallout through Midgar and Final Fantasy VII. Like that area is so dense, and when you walk out of there, it's like, wow, I was in this gargantuan city the entire time, and this giant portion of story has happened. Now that I'm outside of here, it's the open world. I'll just fight random wild enemies in the open until I make it to the next town, and then the density of gameplay kind of increases again. So it's with the pacing of content, it's making sure that when if you have an area that's really dense and concentrated that people start in, when they leave that, the world doesn't just feel empty. That was kind of the problem with Fallout. There's a lot of empty space in that game. There's roads, there's points of interest. You can see a lot of stuff on the horizon, but there's, tons of, square kilometers of just nothing, nothing and nothing. No creatures, no resources, nothing. Elder Scrolls games had a lot of that too.
It's
Uh, Go
I'm
ahead.
really glad you guys have kind of going where I was hoping that it would go. The talking about this topic, I'm obviously very passionate about certain things of it, and I know Neuro too as well, being participating in this actual environment. It's really important to you too, but kind of one of the things that I was hoping would come about is that we would get back to this idea that of transparency and at least efficient communication, clear communication with your community is probably the number one thing developers have to do with a open an early access game, and specifically open development. You just have to do that. You can't not do that, which you know that's that I think is a big reason why the negative experience that I was talking about before has happened, because we had that, and then it kind of drifted away. It's not what it was, and even though people bought into that game, maybe expecting it to be one thing or another, I think the general community would be happy going through the hard times that Daybreak has gone through if that communication was still there. And it's not right now, and I can't say why it's not there or whatever, but it's something that I think any developer can use, and even players too. Any player can look at this situation and maybe be more understanding of other projects when you come across them, and kind of more keen on why things might be the way they are. But I think it's just a great learning example, and fortunately there's still time for it to turn around. But by and large, I think if you're gonna open the gates to your game, whether it's at the launch, or at open beta, or in an early access program where anybody can pay and get in, that's essentially opening the gates. Anytime you're doing that, the only way you can manage player expectations is how you're communicating. So I think doing that ahead of time, whether it's managing your hype train, or the continued discussion if you're in that early access open development situation, it's just so key. And it's just something you can look at Steam, and you can just look at all these games in early access and maybe count on a couple hands how many games are actually doing that well. So it's something that I think and this is a new world for game development. It's something that's newly being explored because internet bandwidth is incredible nowadays. People are able to download the game over and over again as new updates come. It's not something we could have had in the past, I don't think.
Well, there's actually one thing just real quick that I'm going to bring up that you just reminded me of, and that's the ugly side of early access. The ability to hide behind that as a shield for why your game is never going to be launched. And there's a lot of games that exist where the person just downloaded a bunch of assets from the Unity store, slapped them together, put a UI title screen on it, called it early access, made, few $1,000s, and that's all we ever heard from them ever. Some places you can get away with that for longer than others. I remember talking with somebody who said, yeah, $200 a month is all it takes for me to survive in Romania. So, there's places in the world where you can get away with that sort of thing because $3,000 on a crap game, you're set for a couple of years. You're good. You're golden. So it doesn't matter if your reputation is, nothing because you did this. You just needed to put a few assets together, call it an early access game, hype it up a little, put it in a bundle or something, and profits can be made. So that's kind of the ugly side of it, is the idea that people can exploit it and go on the goodness of people who think the idea of the game is great based on the descriptions, because you can theory craft and make up a bunch of awesome stuff that's never going to go in the game and build up a lot of hype on it. So just one caveat of the system.
And again, I think that really just comes back to what we were saying, is both open and honest communication. And that obviously you want people doing it because they actually love their game, and not because they're hoping to make a couple $1,000s off of other people's ignorance, I suppose. So yeah, it just really comes back to openness and honesty, and I think that the more developers kind of embrace that and, look at their communities as assets that they want to communicate with and, want to, bring in and as part of the project, rather than, I guess in your last scenario is, just talking money bags. But other than that, as long as you have that level of communication, things can go very well, but it really does have to be done in the right way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we are getting close to our wrap-up time here, so but we want to thank you guys for listening to us talk here about this topic. Probably a little headier topic than I think we've done in past shows, but I think it's an important one for any fan of gaming in general, not just online gaming. It's just, it's a big thing. We'll see, it may eventually make its way into console gaming now that so many games are becoming downloadable. I expect to see PlayStation 4, Xbox games, that you can download the early access and participate in. I'm sure there may even already be some out there. So, it's just a matter of time as, this movement progresses on. So it's a big, important topic, I think. But yeah, so that's kind of it for our main show today. For us, as far as, obviously 10 Ton Hammer Talks, it's part of 10tonhammer.com. Our parent site, as Jeremy mentioned earlier in the show, if you weren't here for that, that is where the majority of our content lies. So come check it out there, read our stuff, support us that way. Just visiting the site and browsing through things helps support us, but we also have direct support that you can do through Patreon and other forms, and those are all on our main site. A big support 10 Ton Hammer button, you can click that and look for ways if you enjoy this content and want to see more of it or other written content that we do. So we want to thank you for that. And for as far as upcoming content for written, I'm going to actually be kind of taking a new angle on a lot of the games I've covered, because it can't all be doom and gloom, and even though the games I'm covering are in a low point, I think there's ways that we can look at it differently. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of that, so look forward to seeing some new light shed on old topics. And Jeremy, I'm sure your normal crazy unpredictable event coverage.
Yeah, it's actually a few things I'm looking forward to, because the League of Legends LCS is going to be wrapping up this weekend, so there's a couple good storylines coming from there. Will Fnatic be able to go the entire season, including playoffs, without dropping a single game? In North America, you have TSM versus CLG, which is one of the biggest rivalries in esports. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then August 24th, apparently everything is happening. League of Legends servers are moving. Hearthstone's expansion comes out. Diablo 3's new patch, which is going to really shake things up, comes out. So actually, I have a lot of things that I'm going to be looking forward to, as well as normally continuing to update our Heroes of the Storm guides, which you guys should definitely check out. There's some good content there. We're continuing to make those more visually appealing. Make sure the content is up to date, along with our Heroes of the Storm tier list and all that. So actually got a lot of stuff going on for coming week. I'm pretty excited about.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's it for us for 10 Ton Hammer, but we want to thank, too, our special guest this week, Neuro. And Neuro, if you have anything for My Dream you want to talk about upcoming, or your own, or your own personal streaming you want to talk about coming up this week?
Yeah, so let me just kind of get through the list here real quick. So, of course, the My Dream shows, that's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at 2 p.m. Pacific when we do those. It's an art show, coding show, and the community show, which I do on Thursdays. Then there's, of course, it's on Steam Early Access, $15 right now, so come check it out if it's the sort of game that you're into. It's an online sandbox. We didn't really even talk about the content of the game, though. It's kind of funny. Online creative sandbox sort of game. Other than that, there's the Theory Forge show, 5:30s on the Theory Forge channel, 5:30 p.m. Fridays. And we also have another show, 1 p.m. Sundays for Revival. And the other thing that I do is Who's Gaming Now, so tune in 8 p.m.s on that channel, Monday through Thursday, and Wednesdays at noon as well. We have the other half of Multiplayer Wednesdays, and sometimes we'll do developer interviews with European developers on Saturdays around noon. So that's pretty much all I do, where you can find me on the internet, what I've been working on. So that's Neuro.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And as another quick plug for that, I totally forgot. Yeah, we have Theory Forge tonight. I believe myself and Neuro will both be on, and we have Omid Dariani from formerly SOE Daybreak and now with NCSoft, who we're going to talk about actually stuff similar to what we talked about today, but kind of more along the lines of transitioning from a certain monetary model to another one. So another one of those kind of topics. But thanks, you guys. We appreciate the support in chat. Thanks, Axidu, Cobra Strike Force, Baby Cannon, and everybody else that's in chat, silently lurking there. Normally we get a bit of question and answer going. That wasn't quite as much what we had on the plate this week, but we'll look for more of that next week, and another new guest you guys haven't seen before next week. So that's what you can expect for this show next week, same time, 1 p.m. Mountain, sorry, 12 Pacific, and 4 p.m.
3 p.m. 3 p.m. Eastern.
I'm totally off today, but yeah, that's where you can see it. Catch the replays, YouTube, Twitch, here at the channel. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much.
Thanks for coming out, guys.
Cool. See you later.